morning, everybody, and welcome to TLC Live as every Wednesday at 11 in the morning. I'm Maria Gomez and with Orlando Sanchez.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. How was your week?
It was really good, very busy, working a lot, working hard, no hardly working.
Yeah. Okay, we'll take working a lot.
Working a lot.
Yeah.
How you been, Orlando?
I've been really good.
Okay, well, the end of the year is around the corner,
It is.
Christmas,
It is.
and everybody's in a Christmas mood.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of things going on in politics,
Yes.
and we're gonna have a 2022 very busy year.
Yeah,
with
it is going to be
politics.
busy with the primaries coming up, hopefully in March of 2022. So the parties are going to have to decide what candidates will represent them on the general election ballot for November 2022. And then we go straight into 2023 for the municipal elections in major cities, Houston included, which we will decide who will be the city council members, the new mayor, and the new city controller, as both the mayor and the city controller are term limited. But let's not forget that yesterday was a very important day in the history of our country. Yesterday we honored all the men and women who served us in at the beginning of the Second World War. We weren't quite in it, but on December 7th, the Japanese had a sneak attack on our military installation in Hawaii, better known as Pearl Harbor, in which they essentially destroyed a big portion of the Pacific Fleet, and thousands perished, and that's really what caused us to get into the Second World War and end that nightmare that was consuming the world. And so on our website, we honored all of the men and women who served, but interestingly enough, the first person killed in that battle that began the Second World War was a Latino, was a Navy shipmate from San Diego, California, who had roots in Texas. So if you're interested in learning about him or seeing our tribute to the men and women who served at Pearl Harbor and all of the Second World War veterans, go to our website. So anyway, we have an exciting show. We have a businessman today who's head of the Ecuadorian Association from Ecuador.
He's the president of Ecuadorian Association in Houston. He's also a businessman and a very good friend, and we call each other
Primos.
cousins, primos. Porque él es Gómez y yo también soy Gómez.
Yeah, the two Gomezes,
The two Gomez.
but not really related.
No. But we're being good friends for many years. And he's not only an immigrant from Ecuador. He's very conservative and he's been contributed a lot to this community here in Houston and to the Latino community. And we were having a really interesting conversation last night, especially coming from Ecuador from the last 8 years. It's been the power on the left, with
Right.
with Correa and then with Lenin. And just recently this year, finally, it was in power again, a businessman, Guillermo Lasso. He took power in May. And so, coming from...
Is Lasso more moderate? I guess we
More
could
conservative, more conservative,
Well, it's
yes.
about time. But I tell you, Ecuador is a beautiful country. I had the opportunity to visit several years ago and roamed all up from, Guayaquil and Quito all the way down to a little town called Puerto Lopez, so we could watch the whales coming in from Antarctica. And it is just a absolutely delightful country. What's scary to me is, of course, the influence that the Cubans and the Venezuelans with Hugo Chavez have had in the Latin American countries. So it's good news that we have some moderate business people running the country.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, well, Jorge, bienvenido. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos. Thank you so much for your time. I know it was a short notice, but definitely it was a very interesting story. Listen, last night, everything that you were talking about, not only about your country, but how do you came here, when you start, being a businessman and helping the economy, creating jobs. But especially, talking about we're running away from what is going on in our country, and said the last thing that we want is in the United States that happen the same thing.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for having me. And Orlando, it is a pleasure to be here and talking about being a conservative. Yes, you're right. A big example is what we had in Ecuador. And you know what? The sad thing is that we already have a previous example, a horrific example, which is Venezuela. Venezuela was a rich country. I would think that the middle class have a splendid life, and then now the way that it looks now, the way that it is now, my father-in-law and my mother-in-law, they live in Venezuela, previous Chavez. And they always told me about the stories about what a splendid life there was over there, And and I see it, and I see it, and I saw what happened to Ecuador. It's about buying conscious. They start giving money to the people so they can buy votes and keep them thinking that that is the right government. In the meantime, they create more taxes, they create more rules and regulations, making business more complicated, And I guess we'll start looking few things over here in the United States. It's a little scary. It's a little scary, but you know what? It's up to us to provide the right information to who? To our young generation, to our kids. Be engaged with the young kids that they're transforming their mind and they're listening to media. I mean, yesterday I was listening to YouTubing, a program, and I started paying attention, and the way that they show United States is that it's a place where it's unfair, that is a place where there's no future, that there's a place that if you are especially a minority, the opportunity to get out in life is minimum, which is incorrect. That is incorrect. I think that what they're trying to do is brainwash people thinking that life is unfair, that there's no opportunity, and by that is putting a stop in their brains about thinking, of going, creating business, being positive, being energetic, providing the right energy to the people that surround us.
We hear. Are you? I don't
Can
know
you
if
can you hear me?
No,
he's
we
good.
can
Yeah.
now.
Okay.
Okay.
Jorge, tell us a little bit about your story. When you came here to United States, um, and what was the situation in that time in Ecuador, and how do you see Ecuador now? And then we all come to this country for better opportunities. And now seeing what is going on in this country, it's very sad. And we were talking last night, you and I, you were talking about the young generation, and you were talking about your kids. And your kids, since I know your kids since they were little, and that's how we go back in time, our friendship. And then you were telling me, well, now they're adults, they're young adults.
Yes.
And you were telling
Yes.
me, my kids now, they vote conservative.
Correct.
And that come from home, and you were telling me that's what we need to do. We need to teach and we need to educate our new generations.
Correct. Así es, Andrea. It is important that as a parents we get engaged of what is happening with them, what they're listening, because if we hear something that is not correct, we don't need to obligate them to be thinking the way that we think. What we need to do is to establish a conversation and to have fundamentals in whatever they are saying, not just repeating something that they heard from somebody else. And going back to how I came to United States, well, I used to travel. I used to travel a lot since early age because we import industrial machinery to Ecuador, and we not only import industrial machinery, but also we provide the financing. And there was a moment in Ecuador that we start losing power. And something that I didn't understand is that they were cutting power for 4, sometimes 5 hours a day. So when I used to travel all around the country, to collect, because we did everything. We traveled to different countries, we import the machinery, we get it ready for sale, we did the sale, and then we used to collect the money. So
Like, we're losing him.
can you hear me?
Yeah, now we hear you.
Okay, perfect. So I didn't understand.
No, we're
Yeah,
losing
we're
him.
losing him. Okay. Well, what's interesting is that Jorge talks about, he mentioned education, and we were talking about the fact that, America is still the greatest country in the world. I mean, we have Jorge from Ecuador, we have you from Colombia, I'm from Cuba. We've all experienced what the socialists do in our countries of origin. And this is what was really frightening Latinos in the United States that come here for economic opportunities and an opportunity for their children. For people like Jorge, he has become a leader in industry here in the United States and in Houston. His children are being well educated. In fact, I think one of his children is a medical student at the
Yeah.
University of Houston. I think
Mm-hmm.
one of the early classes. I mean, those sort of opportunities only happen in America. But what Jorge talked about is the importance of education, and he started off talking about the importance of education and having a conversation in the family, not to get the children to think the way you do, but to simply have a conversation and have a comparative analysis of socialism versus free markets. Free markets and the private sector are not perfect. Yes, there are abuses, and that's why we have government to have some modest regulation to make sure that people are not abused at work, that they have an 8-hour day, and that they get breaks, and that they get some vacation and some time off, so that we don't create dangerous environments for them to work. But what Jorge brought up is the importance of having a conversation at home, that the
Mm-hmm.
families have a conversation with the children and then they go off to school. Unfortunately, and I think this is what frightens Jorge, and he can speak for himself, what frightens me, and I'm sure what's frightening you, is that our education system is dwindling in terms of its mission, which is education, to present both sides, to present the facts,
Yeah.
and now it's become indoctrination.
Correct.
And for those of us that come from socialist Latin American countries where we've seen this behavior by government, where Jorge talked about that the socialists come in and they start passing out the country's resources in an effort to buy and maintain their power. And then when they run out of money, they have to raise taxes from the ever diminishing private sector and make it more burdensome, so that the private sector flees that country, and then you end up like Venezuela or like Cuba. No resources, no contributions to the world economy, people living in poverty. And the only equality in Cuba and Venezuela is the equality of poverty. And as Jorge said, I lived in Venezuela. I lived in Caracas, a beautiful country with vast resources, natural resources, all the oil in the world. I mean, and it's been squandered. And so this is what concerns us as immigrants in this country, is that we see an ever growing and ever more powerful government now, with all these mandates and the education system, which has been infiltrated, unfortunately, by the left. And yes, I'm going to say that, by the left, that are not good actors, that are trying to brainwash our children. And what's interesting to me is, Jorge, I think you're back, is that we looked at the elections in Virginia, where you had Terry McAuliffe, who used to be the bag man for the Clintons, a very leftist kind of governor, who said parents that sit down and shut up. Parents don't have a say in the education of their children. And it backfired in Virginia. Parents around the country are now standing up and saying, we want our children educated with our tax dollars, but we sure as hell don't want them indoctrinated.
That is correct, Orlando. Going back to the elections in Ecuador, when our new president, Guillermo Lasso, got elected, you don't know the relief that the people felt, because that that little country, Ecuador, it became an example for the rest of Latin America, that yes, it can be changed, which is the same thing that we saw in Virginia, you know. And the people are smart. What we need to do is we need to get integrated, and we need to vote. And our kids, they need to learn to vote. It is very important that everybody gets involved. Uh, and I'm like you, Orlando. I honestly don't like watching news, you know, because it's too much negativity. That's all you hear is negativity. And I do not believe in negativity, and I don't want my family to believe in negativity. But there is something that we need to realize is we need to listen, so we see what's really going on. what is being sold to the public, to the people, so we can relate to our kids and go back to the basics and say, okay, you're listening to this, but let's talk about it. What is your point of view? In that way, they can see they like by themselves.
Yeah. One of the things that I want to ask you, Jorge, because you certainly have lived in Latin America and in Ecuador. I've been in the United States since 1962, and even though I do pay attention to what happens in our own hemisphere, I'm not as well versed because I haven't had business transactions. And by the way, we're having a bad video from you, but we still have your audio, so we're just going to keep your picture up until we get your video situation fixed. But anyway, one of the things that disturbs me, Jorge, is American foreign policy with respect to Latin America. What I see too often, a couple of things. When a more moderate, a more business friendly, a more democratic government gets elected in Latin American countries, sometimes I am concerned because some countries have a lot of corruption, and the corruption causes the very wealthy to increase their wealth and not spread the wealth and increase the middle class in America. In Latin America. Beyond that, the U.S. policy has been to give aid to Latin American countries, but they'll just transfer a couple of $10 million, $100 million to a country, and then we don't hold them accountable so that those dollars don't filter down to the people, meaning better infrastructure, better education, better access to health care, spreading the democratic message, right? That money ends up in the pockets, unfortunately, of a handful of politicians, and that's the problem I see in Latin America. Am I right or am I wrong? Yeah, I guess we lost him again. Okay, so again, that's the problem that we have is that we got to make sure, like in Ecuador now, when we have a Latin American,
We have him again.
Democratically elected but a free market president, that that we have a rule of law and that we eliminate corruption in Latin America. I was recently in Mexico, Andrea, and I've got to say, I think Mexico, in spite of the fact that we have a left-leaning president, I think Mexico's improved in terms of at least what I see. There's a commitment to infrastructure. There's better, social integration. There's at least talk about economic development and broadening the middle class. But I don't know, Jorge, if you heard me, but I was concerned. I don't know how much of that you heard. I was concerned about American foreign policy in Latin America, and then I'm worried about the fact that when business-friendly, center-leaning or center-right candidates are elected in Latin America, that they ensure that we have the rule of law so that we can eliminate corruption in Latin American countries, because that's, I think, what hurts us. Okay. Thank you.
Orlando, is when you give all the money to the government and they take control of the money so they can, in their mind, there's a selling idea to the people that they're going to provide more highways, that they're going to provide more education, that X amount of excuses so they can get all the money. Well, when there's so much money in the government, in the hands of the government, it creates corruption. And as you say, the people doesn't get accounted for it. In other words, the governors, they feel that they don't need to provide any information to the people that elect them. 2 days ago, they did an interview to Elon Musk. I think it was the Wall Street Journal, correct? And he was saying that he was against of the $1 trillion that the government is trying to provide, for new connectivities and highways and etc. And something very interesting came out from his mouth. It was that why, when you have the private sector that they can grow and make it happen.
Yeah. Okay, I think we lost his audio again, so we
Yeah,
have a bad connection.
we have a
Jorge,
bad
thanks for
connection.
joining us. I appreciate it, and we're going to move on to our next guest. But it's interesting to get that perspective from somebody that's lived down in in Latin America, and this is, again, my concern. And this is, I know this is far removed, but this is another reason why we need to control, the waves of illegal immigration, because we can't absorb millions of people that come from countries that have not experienced free and democratic elections, experience a lot of corruption, that have that mentality that all governments are corrupt. So we need to control immigration. We need to allow certain people in, or just a limited number of people in, so that our system can begin to integrate those folks into our society and understand that we're a little different in the sense that we have a rule of law. We don't have corruption here. So in other words, if you break the law, or if you engage in malfeasance in a contract, you're going to go before a judiciary that's impartial and have a hearing, which doesn't happen in a lot of Latin American countries. And that's why it's so important that we have voter integrity in our elections, that we know that the vote you cast actually is going to count, and it's not corrupted by a bunch of folks cheating in the election. That's why it's important to make sure that parents monitor this, and that's why we're gotten involved in the school board races here in the last couple of days, because that's probably the most poorly participated in elections in our country, and certainly here. And yet, those are the most important
People
elections.
don't pay attention to that. And you know what, Orlando, that's another thing that I want to bring it up. In Latin America, you don't vote for those positions. So you don't know better.
Right.
So, like, if you're an immigrant here and you just got here, for example, or you just, or probably you've been here 10 years or whatever, or you're raising your kids here. But even if you're a U.S. citizen and you can vote, we're not used to those kind of elections, because we don't vote in our countries for those things. So we need more education, not only to pay attention to education of our kids, but we need to educate the parents. We need to educate our Latino community when it comes to vote for the local elections, for the school district elections, for mayor elections. Local is very important, and something that we don't pay attention, because in our countries, it's mostly, every 4 years is elections. I mean, yeah, we have a different elections for Congress and things like that, but over there is more like for president. So that's where we come from, and also we don't believe over there in the politicians. So we come here and we're just very like, I don't want to be involved in politics.
Yeah.
So if we come to this country, to live in this country, to better opportunities in this country, so everything that happens in this country matters to us. Everything impacts our life, impacts our families, impacts our kids. So it's very important to get involved in these elections that you're saying, that HISD, for example, or any school district that is in your area. It's very important to get involved as a parent. And even if you're not a parent,
You're a taxpayer.
You are paying taxes to the school. You're paying taxes, and whatever happened with the kids, it's impact our life. And that's why I want to introduce our next guest, because especially talking about kids, she is Maria Valeria Brock, and she is running for the 315 Juvenile District Court. It's scary, everything that is going on with our juveniles. It's scary, everything that is going on with our teenagers. It's very scary, like seeing kids being charged as an adult for criminal violence. So it's very scary, and that's what, I was very happy that Maria was able to be with us, because this is a very important issue. Especially, I have twins and they're teenagers, 16 years old, and seeing everything that is going on with the teenagers these days, 14, 15, 16 years old, killing other people, and with firearms. So that's very scary.
Mm-hmm.
So, Maria, welcome, bienvenida. Thank you so much for your time and being with us, and for running and to this important position.
Maria, make sure that you're not that you unmute yourself. I think you muted yourself earlier, so we can't hear you.
Yeah, we can now hear
I
you.
did.
Think.
There you go.
Can you hear
Welcome.
me now?
We hear you fine.
Well, gracias por la invitación. I am very happy to be here today. I am running for a juvenile district court position as the judge, and I have been listening to everything that you've been discussing with Jorge, And I'm impressed. And I also want to share with you how important it is for our community, the Latino community, to get involved, as you were saying. I'm going to share an example with you. My family's from Argentina, and we emigrated here. I was born in Argentina. We emigrated here when I was 18 months old, and I've been back to visit family and relatives in Argentina. When I went back as I don't know, I might have been 20, I was in college, people were complaining about the state of affairs, the political state of affairs in Argentina. And having been raised here in the United States, my perspective was, let's do something about it. Why are you not doing something about it? And the attitude, I don't want to say complacency, but the attitude was really discouragement. What I heard over and over and over again was, that's just the way it is. Things don't change. We can't do anything about it. One of the great gifts of living in the United States is that we can do something about it. We can vote. We can change things that we don't like. It's a completely different attitude. I can't speak to every country in Latin America, but I can speak to my own country. And how do we do that? So from my perspective, I've worked my entire adult life, mostly in the Latino community, with children and families. I'm an attorney, but before that, I was a teacher. I've been involved in social work, kinds of professions. So I've seen the family unit and children from a lot of different angles. And as Latinos, we have a real advantage because we do value family. We are attached to our families. We want our families to succeed. And I think that we have a great contribution to make to the culture of our country, the United States, by sharing those values of respect, of family unity, of caring for our children, of staying involved in our children's lives. My children, my youngest is now a senior in high school. My oldest is 36. I still talk to my children every day. We stay involved in our children's lives. And so we have not only something to give, we have opportunities to educate our families, even onto the next generation.
Yeah.
Right?
You know, one of the things that's not to crow about our show, but for those that are watching, you know, this morning we have had a cornucopia of Latinos on the show. Do you know what cornucopia means? An abundance, a lot. Anyway, sometimes I have to translate for Andrea Maria. But anyway,
sí, María, todavía sigo aprendiendo inglés, María.
We've had a gentleman from Ecuador. I'm from Cuba. Andrea's from Colombia. Maria's from Argentina. You're getting a flavor of the Latino community in Houston. We're the most diverse city in the nation with a huge Latino population. And everyone thinks that because we're Latinos, or as the media wants to call us, because they want to destroy Latino or Latina, they think we're Latinx, which, by the way, no one uses that. I saw a poll yesterday where only 2% of the Latino population like the word Latinx, and 40% are absolutely outraged that they use it. And I say, let the liberal left continue to call us Latinx. Just continue to isolate and the Hispanic community. But, the world thinks, the political world, the media thinks, because we're Latinos, we're all, Democrats, liberal Democrats at that. We're not. And if you look at the polling results in the state of Texas anyway, we are not monolithic in our polling. I mean, in our voting. I mean, we listen to the issues. I wish we would participate more as a community, and we are getting there because this is what I say all the time. I have had the opportunity to travel the state of Texas, and I continue to say that I am absolutely amazed at this young generation, Maria, that is speaking up, standing up for American values, for the values of a Constitution, for the preservation of the Bill of Rights, for the preservation of our constitutional guarantees, for the preservation of the family, for the preservation of free markets and a democracy. And to me, that's just inspiring. I started off creating this political action committee that we call Texas Latino Conservatives, sort of kind of a pessimistic view of, oh my God, you know, what's going to happen in the future. But I am absolutely motivated by what I see across the state of Texas. And frankly, as we look at the number of Latino candidates that are filing to seek office, it's no longer just filing in one party.
No.
It is. You look at Harris County, and we now have 3 candidates running for county judge that are Latinos.
Yeah.
That has never happened. We have children of immigrants down in the valley running for U.S. Congress. We have Hispanic kids being elected to city councils in Midland and Kerrville, Texas, and Alvin, Texas, and we have a chairman of the Republican Party down in Maverick County who was himself a Latino. So I'm inspired, and I want you to talk a little bit about the judicial system, the position that you're seeking an office for. A lot of people understand that we have state district courts, but they don't understand we have juvenile state district courts. So explain the difference. Why do we have an adult district court system and a juvenile system in Texas?
So let me back up a little bit. The state district court system permits judges to hear cases, any case in the county in which they're elected, and as a visiting judge in any court in the whole state. In small counties, the district court will hear all kinds of cases.
Correct.
In a large county like Harris County,
I'm going to call you Judge. Let me just explain because I like to give people examples. For example, in our neighboring county, Galveston County, state district judges listen to all kinds of cases. It's not like Harris County, which is so big. We have criminal, we have civil, we have family courts, we have juvenile courts. So I just wanted to give people an example of what Harris County judicial system looks like and Galveston County looks like.
So that's exactly right. We have, as a state district judge, which I hope to become, we have authority to enforce and interpret the laws, not that we put in place, but that the legislature put in place.
Good for you.
That's a very important thing.
Absolutely.
Okay. That's our duty. Now, the court that I'm running for, it specializes in cases that affect children. And that means children who are in danger, who have been brought to the attention of CPS, Children's Protective Services, and it means children who have been charged with some kind of juvenile delinquency. Because they're children, we don't really consider them criminal, right? Children are different than adults. They have a different level of maturity. They have a different level of understanding of right and wrong. And that being said, they still sometimes behave badly, but we call them children in need of supervision, right? Because they have broken a law and we want to get them back on the right track. Right? Children are remarkably teachable, more than adults. And so the thrust of the juvenile courts is more rehabilitation, less punishment, although those of us who are parents, we know that discipline is really a form of teaching children, right? Anyone who lets their child get away with everything and everything isn't producing a responsible adult, right? So that's what we do in the courts that I've worked in for, I've been an attorney for 31 years this year. I'm embarrassed to say that because it ages me a little bit.
No, it's
But
fine. Experience.
but
That is
that's
experience.
experience. That's right. I've seen it from a lot of different angles. And can I say that I've seen a change over time. I grew up, I was little in the 60s and 70s, right? And at that time, children had a lot of support. There's what I think of as the church, school, family triangle, right? And we participated in all of that, and there were caring adults in all those systems who helped keep us on the right track. That's not always the case for our children today, right? Sometimes our children go to school and they're getting a completely different message than they're getting at home, right? A lot of families don't participate actively in, well, I'm not talking about a particular belief system, but in any kind of church organization where you're also
Some sort of
taught.
value system.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking of, where we had, and it worked together, right? I remember getting in trouble at school and having the teacher call my parents, and then getting in trouble more at home,
Oh yeah.
right? It wasn't a case of my parents defending me as to what the teacher was saying. My parents believed the teacher because they knew the teacher wouldn't call them if I hadn't been misbehaving. And so
Maria,
they
Maria, you were
reinforced each
talking
other.
about, a key word is discipline. A key word is discipline. And as you're saying, you're being a lawyer for 31 years. Um, I'm 49 years old. I'm coming from a country, Latin American country. I was born and raised there. I have a mother, a parent that they were very strict with me, and I see the big difference, raising kids in this country, this time of that we're living right now with the technology and everything that they have access. I don't see much discipline on the kids, and I compare myself with this generation, and I compare myself with the from the country and the family that I come from with this country. And I'm not saying there is something wrong with this country. I think it's everywhere that this is going on. It's not that in Colombia is different or in Mexico is different. We still, the Latino community, we preserve our values, but I see a big difference between my parents raising me than the parents these days raising the kids, and nothing to do with la chancla o pegarles en las nalgas, nada de eso tiene que ver. But I think it's a
Tirarles
big,
del pelo. Mi mamá siempre
o
nos.
jalarles el pelo. Nada tiene que ver with that kind of violence. But it's discipline. I'm very disciplined with my kids, very strict with my kids. And I think more parents need to do that with their kids. That way, prevent many things.
That's funny. I have to say, if my parents were raising me today instead of the 1960s, they'd be investigated by Child Protective Services. They'd have the police.
My mom the same.
They'd have the police department checking out because they beat me to a pulp, and I needed it. Let me just tell you, and we don't see that nowadays. This is important, Maria. You mentioned something. This is what I've said all along in my political career. That it is a three-legged stool that holds up society. It's the family, it's the education system, and it's a spiritual connection. I'm not saying that you have to be Christian. I'm not saying you have to be Muslim or Buddhist or, Hindu or anything, but that you have a spiritual connection to a greater being, that you have a rounded education. And what I mean by rounded education, it's not the educational system to promote a religion, right? But it is the responsibility of an education system to talk about common and shared values of our country, which are that we are a constitutional government, that we have rights, that we want to keep the states in power. We're not. People think that the president is so powerful. No, our system as government was made so that the 50 states had the power, and that limited power would be given to the federal government and what is called the enumerated powers. We have identified what powers we give to the federal government. For example, coining the money. That's an enumerated power, right? The right to make treaties, the right to create an army for the common defense, the right to regulate interstate commerce, that is, commerce between the states. But everything else not specifically given to Washington, D.C., is reserved for the people of California, of Washington State, of Montana, of Nevada, of Oklahoma, and of Texas. This is an important concept which sets our country apart. And so whatever powers are not given to the federal government are reserved to the people. And so those are the values. We call that civics. Those are the values, common values, that the system of education needs to be promulgating to our children. People get
And
that confused.
you can see, Orlando, why that's so important. In part, it's important because we're huge. We are a huge country. You can drive for 12 hours and still be in Texas. Okay? That's about the size of the whole country of France. Okay? If you're in Europe and you drive 12 hours, you've probably gone through 4 different countries.
Right.
So our cultures are different. You know, people in New York talk funny, right? And I'm sure they think the same of us. Our accents are different. Our values are different. Our needs, importantly, our needs are different. Texas is largely, even though we live in a big city and Harris County is very urban, Texas largely is still agricultural, right? And so because we're so huge and our needs are so different, the power of the states to do what's right for the people in their state is critically important, because Washington can't impose on us what California might need, what Wisconsin might need, what Florida might need. That would be inappropriate for the people who are living here in Texas. And that's why we have to really pay attention, not just to federal elections, but to local elections. What a gift.
Yeah,
What a
but
gift that
Maria,
we can
this is not
impact.
that's not what's being taught. That's not what's being taught, and kids have no concept. And this is what makes our education system, which, as I've often said, is no longer education, it is now indoctrination, is that it's important to teach those common shared
Absolutely.
values.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't, we started every day with the Pledge of Allegiance and with Honor the Texas Flag, right? I'm not sure that schools do that anymore. I I think that goes to, and you know more about this, Orlando, than I do, but that kind of is part of the drift towards socialism, which is essentially just giving away what we are entitled to under the Constitution.
Correct.
And you correct me if I'm wrong about that.
No, I agree. I agree. I got to tell you, in the 1960s, when I started at Shern Elementary School in Houston, Texas, I didn't speak a lick of English. But I do remember that every day we did start off with a prayer, and we did start off with a Pledge of Allegiance. And even though the prayer was a Christian-based prayer, which, it's going to lead into a different conversation, because I do want to talk to you about this. This is what makes our country so great. For a long time we had this separation of church and state, right? We've had this concept in the Constitution that we don't have a state religion, right? We don't like the Church of England. We don't have the Church of the United States. So we are free to worship. Uh, and so that created a lot of battles where a lot of folks started filing lawsuits in federal courts saying that, it was unconstitutional to force a child to say, let's say, for example, the Lord's Prayer. I happen to agree with that because not every child in that classroom is a Christian. That there may be Jewish kids, or maybe Muslim kids, or maybe Hindus in the class, or maybe kids that don't believe. That's up to the family to teach what the children. But our common value system ought to say that we could at least have a moment of silence, a moment to reflect, a moment to think about the liberties and the freedoms, and to the extent that you are Jewish or Christian or Muslim, to thank your God, your Creator. I think that's important. Am I right or wrong on that, Maria?
I am a believer in the separation of church and state. I want to start with that.
I am too.
And I think to the extent that we're not inviting our children to develop the side of their nature that's spiritual, we're doing them a disservice.
I agree.
Right? Because we have a physical body, we have a mental sort of, I don't know what to call it, a mental body, let's call it that. But we also have a spiritual body, right? We have all three. And it's that balance between those things impacts us in our daily life.
So, Maria, let's talk about your platform. Tell us about what do you want to change in that juvenile district court, why you decide to run for office, and what it need to be done.
So my primary concern, which is also what drove me to put my name in the hat and hope to be elected as the judge of the 315th Juvenile District Court, is
And
safety.
by the way, you're running on the Republican side, correct? Let's clear that
Yes,
up. And so
yes, I am.
you will be on the ticket in the primary, provided that it's in March. And explain to us, do you have opponents in the primary, or are you the only candidate seeking the Republican nomination?
In the moment, I believe I'm the only candidate seeking the nomination. Now, the filing deadline is Monday, December 13th. And so really until after December 13th, I won't know whether or not I have an opponent in the primary. So that's where I am, right? And I will say, I want to say thank you to everyone who might be watching, who's supported me in getting enough signatures to get on the ballot. I think I have in the neighborhood of 1,000 signatures right now, and we need 750 to get on the ballot and have the fee waived. So thank you. Thank you to our community. What I'm concerned about right now is safety. I don't believe the courts who are in charge of keeping our children and our community safe are doing their job. For the juvenile courts, it's two different kinds of safety. On the CPS side, the child welfare side, it's making sure that all children are in safe, stable homes. Okay. On the juvenile delinquency side, it's making sure that the community is safe. Because as you were saying, there are lots of teenagers who are involved in violent crimes. Mm-hmm. Right? And that's not okay. That's not okay. There are also, and this is a piece that I don't really like, but it's because of factors that are really outside of my control. There's also a lot of kids who are ending up in the juvenile delinquency, juvenile justice system who may not belong there, right? The path for a child, for example, who got in trouble at school was usually disciplined by the teacher, and then if that didn't work, disciplined by the principal, right? And that used to be the end of it. It seems to me that there's an awful lot of cases that used to be handled at the principal office level that are now ending up in the juvenile justice system. And that's not okay either, right? So in some ways, because I think, all those school shootings had an impact on how much responsibility the schools wanted to take for discipline within the school. And so there was a lot of dumping, if I can use that word, of children into the juvenile justice system who, they're not really juvenile delinquents.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Who need that kind of intensive supervision, those intensive rehabilitation efforts, all that kind of stuff, that kids who scare us because they're committing violent crimes need, in the hopes that they can be rehabilitated and become productive members of society.
Yeah, no, it's a tough situation, and I'm gonna tell you, I have tremendous respect for teachers who have the burden of the world on them. I mean, most are trying to do the right thing, and they're caught up in this bureaucratic nightmare, which perhaps some parents would like to see the school district and teachers and coaches exercise a little more discipline. Then there are parents that believe that, how dare a teacher talk to my child that way? And of course, they sensationalize the bad apple, the bad teacher that goes absolutely nuts on a child, and so it is tough. I mean, I remember in the old days when I went to school, our coach, I mean, he had a paddle, and we used to have corporal punishment. There was discipline.
Orlando, my first year teaching, I was 21. It was before I went to law school. The PE coach, the physical education coach, sought me out and was like, Miss Mattioli, because that was my maiden name, Miss Mattioli, if you have any problems with any of the children, you send them to me.
Send them my way.
I was, it's not exactly what I was expecting, but that was the mentality.
The dreaded coach.
Yeah. I think we have a lot to do. We have a lot to do. A lot of education, not only from the parents, from the school system.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
But there's no discipline at home. There's no discipline in the school, and then we're wondering.
It's a domino effect.
We wonder why it's crazy. But anyway, Maria, we're running out of time. We have about 2 minutes left. I want you to make an appeal to those that are Spanish speakers, why it's important to register and to vote, why is it important to be involved in the education system, and why is it important to vote for the state district courts that actually oversee juveniles. En español, si puedes.
Sí, voy a tratar de hacerlo en español. Ustedes que están ahí con sus familias y quieren lo mejor para sus hijos, tienen una oportunidad de tener una voz cuando ponen su voto en los candidatos que también quieren lo mejor para sus hijos y lo mejor para sus familias y para que tengan oportunidad de salir adelante. Todos nosotros que venimos a este país queríamos hacerlo por oportunidad. Y esa oportunidad está en peligro ahora, en este momento. Necesitamos usar nuestros votos para poner personas que piensen como nosotros pensamos, que los valores que tenemos de nuestros padres, de nuestras guías espirituales, son los valores que nuestro país necesitan tener. So, les urjo, por favor, que se registren a votar y después de registrarse, que vayan a votar. Es lo más importante que pueden hacer. Es el regalo mejor que pueden hacer para sus hijos.
Well said.
María, muchas gracias. Y before you leave, just call to action, as I always say, call to action, where we can find you and how we can support you.
Oh, thank you. Well, for the moment, until December 13th, I just hope to be on the ballot. I'm trusting that I will be. And I can always be reached through the Harris County Republican Party. And later in the year, after the holidays, I will have my own website and some opportunities for people to volunteer and some opportunities for people to donate.
All right. Well, thank you, Maria. Best of luck. We hope to see you on the ballot and as the Republican nominee in November of 2022. Bueno.
Maria, gracias.
I always
Thank
say,
you.
you know, I love the accents of the different countries, and I've got
And today, for sure, we had it.
Right? We have Cubans and Colombians and people from Ecuador and people from Argentina. But I have to say, and I want to ask you, my favorite accent is of the Argentinos. I love the way Argentinos talk and their accent. What's your favorite?
In Spanish?
En español, claro.
Oh, en español.
Yeah, of the Spanish accents, right? You have the Spaniards and you have the Venezuelans and you have the Cubans, the Caribbean, the Dominicans, the Mexicans, Argentinos, Bolivianos. What's your favorite accent?
Okay, I agree with you. I like the Argentinians.
I love the Argentinians.
But as everybody, you know, in each country, is different accents
Right.
inside the country.
Correct.
So, me gusta el argentino, pero de Mendoza, no de Buenos Aires.
Ah, bueno, qué específica.
Ah,
Es
bueno,
como
para
decir,
que vea que sí sé.
me encanta
Los argentinos que están escuchándome, me gusta mucho el acento argentino de Mendoza, además que son menos creídos.
Ah, bueno, entonces es como
Se
decir,
creen
me
menos.
gusta el vino tinto, pero a mí me gusta el de Bordeaux.
Correcto.
O me gusta el de Sonoma.
Correcto.
Pero ¿qué experiencia tienes
Mira,
tú?
no, es que los argentinos son muy guapos, pero me gustan más los de Mendoza.
Espérate, ¿y los cubanitos?
Ah, no, los cubanos son, sí, también
Guapísimos.
son aparte que tienen un swing.
Bueno, yo no
Yo
sé
no sé
nada,
dónde,
yo no
que
sé
yo
nada
sé-
de
que
eso.
yo sí
no
sé.
Yo no sé yo no sé bailar. Eso no. Mi
Bueno,
padre
tú
le
no
gustaba
aplicas.
bailar, yo no aprendí.
Tú no aplicas como el real cubano. El
No.
cubano auténtico sabe bailar.
Yo sé.
Pero bueno, tú
Bueno,
eres así como
pero
que-
me fumo mis puros. Tomo ron a vez en cuando.
¿Mm?
Y sí oigo un poco de cumbia
Pero
o
no.
salsa o
¿Sí te
merengue.
gusta la salsa?
Me gusta escucharla, pero no puedo moverme.
Bueno,
No
ok.
sé.
No puede ser perfecto.
A lo
¿no?
mejor un día si me tomo mucho ron me puedes dar ahí clases.
No puede ser perfecto, Orlando.
Nadie puede ser perfecto. Bueno, muchas gracias. We enjoyed that you joined us today. If you can't catch us live, you can catch us on YouTube. We rerun the programs on Facebook anytime. Again, Texas Latino Conservatives is a volunteer organization. We exist by the generosity of Texans that want to make sure that our conservative message reaches the Latino community across the state of Texas. I've often said, and I said before in the 2020 elections, that it would be the Latino community, especially down in South Texas, that would save Texas. We did well in the 2020 elections. We maintained our conservative leadership in the state of Texas, and we invite you to participate and become a member of Texas Latino Conservatives. If you like what we do, what our message is, then make a donation. You don't have to be a member. Write a check to Texas Latino Conservatives. Remember, we are a general purpose state PAC where we actually make contributions, we produce commercials, we support candidates. But we're also a 501c4 through our nonprofit organization where we do programs like Leadership Latino. This is our intensive one-day class where we teach young Hispanics across the state of Texas, and they don't have to be Hispanic, but most of our classes are Hispanic, on how to participate in the political process. So we're doing good work in Texas. We need your help. None of this is cheap, so make a contribution to Texas Latino Conservatives. Go to our webpage, Texas Latino Conservatives, hit the donate button, and make a contribution. We want to wish you a wonderful week. And we will be back next week with another series of exciting guests.
And next week is going to be our last show of the year. Then we're going to take 2 weeks.
We are?
Yes, we are. We're taking
I
2
didn't know
weeks.
that.
Yeah, we are taking 2 weeks break. You know, Christmas and New Year is coming up, and we need also a break. We need to be with our families, spend time. I'm gonna be with my parents, my brother, and my kids, spending a good time out of Texas, out of United
Yeah,
States.
we've heard.
So thank you so much. And as Maria said, it's very important to vote, but also it's very important to run for office. As Latinos, or anybody that you think that you can run for office. So remember, in Texas Latino Conservatives, we have a Latino leadership program that we teach you how to run for office from A to Z. And our next class is going to be at the end of January. So stay tuned.
In El Paso, Texas.
In El Paso, Texas. Stay tuned in Texas Latino Conservatives, texaslatiноconservatives.com. We always put our events and
check out our new website, by the way.
Oh,
and
my
give us
God,
the
it's
feedback.
amazing. It's
All right,
beautiful.
we're out of time. We guys, we'll see you next week.
See you next
God
Wednesday.
bless.
Nos vemos.
Enjoy the rest of your week. Take
Ciao,
care.
ciao.